This episode of The People of PCPS is brought to you through the generous support of Joe Fisher's office at Midstate Educators Insurance. For more information, visit insurepolk.com. Welcome to the People of PCPS, a Polk County Public Schools podcast. This podcast is dedicated to telling the stories of teachers, paraeducators, support staff, students, volunteers, alumni, and all the people who contribute to Polk County Public Schools. Whether they're working in the school district, learning in our classrooms, or using their education to improve our community, the people are what make Polk County Public Schools great. Let's get to know our colleagues, our students, our neighbors, and our friends, the people of PCPS.
Hi everyone, my name is Rachel Pleasant. I'm the Senior Director of Communications here at Polk County Public Schools, and welcome to the People of PCPS. This is a podcast that we created just to get to know the people of our great organization and learn more about their stories and find out about what they contribute to our school district, because we believe it's the people who make this a great place to work and learn. And we are very happy to have with us today Dani Higgins, who works with our Migrant student program.
Yes.
Dani, remind me of your actual title.
So I'm a migrant interventionist with the Title I Migrant program, which is under, obviously, Title I, but we're Title I Part C.
So I'm very excited to have you here today because you deal with you work every day with a segment of our student population that many people just never registers for them. They have no idea what it's like to be a migrant student and the challenges that come with that. And you're there every day. So you're going to teach us all a lot about the students that you serve. So tell me just real quick before we go into your day-to-day work, why did you want to work with migrant students? Why was this something that called to you?
Well, as a young teacher, when I started out with Polk County Schools, which is in 2002, so I just really wanted to be an advocate for students, and that's something that I felt very strongly about. And I also really liked working with underserved students. And so I learned that early on was a passion of mine. And when I saw that there was a position open working with the migrants as a migrant advocate, I said, this is a perfect job for me. And I've been in this position for 16 years, working with predominantly the same population, and I love it. So I think it was a perfect fit.
So you had no history of working with migrant students specifically, but you just wanted to help students who needed extra help in some way. Is that right?
Exactly. I just love the idea of being an advocate. And I think that some people really need advocacy, especially those who may not be able to speak up for themselves, and they need that extra additional support to stand in. So again, many of us have no knowledge whatsoever of the program or what what life is like for our migrant students. So just give us an overview real quickly of the program, how many students you're serving, and what kind of services you're providing. Okay, so the Migrant program was created to help overcome challenges that are specific to the needs of migrant students and who can be very disadvantaged. And that was something, so this is a federal program that they have in every state. And basically what our program does is try to overcome challenges that are predominantly around mobility. These students have frequent school interruptions. Many of them leave early in the school year to harvest crops in other states, their families. And so I just want to also define migrant student because there is, some people think differently, but we are talking about farm workers. These are migrant and seasonal farm workers that travel out of state or across district lines to obtain agricultural work. So most of my families that I serve in this area are in Mulberry. They come during about October, November in the fall, and they work different crops, predominantly in our area, tomatoes and strawberries, but we also have shorter seasons with blueberries and melons and things like that. But oftentimes the families also leave early in the school year, before the end of the school year, to go up north. And so that kind of mobility can cause school interruption. It can cause students to fall behind. It can cause high school students to lose credits. There's all kinds of things that can happen. And so the Migrant Education Program basically is to help with those challenges with that mobility, but also language barriers. Many of our families are Spanish-speaking parents, and sometimes our students, especially at the elementary level. And And additional things that migrant families can face, like social isolation. They live in very rural areas. And as you can imagine with the pandemic, it's even been more socially isolated. And also with just poverty, families living in poverty. These are people that live oftentimes below the poverty line. So those are just some things that the program was created to kind of help those students to be on grade level, help them meet those requirements to graduate. And I think we do this through supplemental supports like academic support. It could be tutoring. It can be during the school year. And we also have funds to provide academic support during the summer. So we're just kind of like the extra.
So you work daily with migrant students and their families, and the theme of this conversation is kind of like help us know more about their lives. So can you just kind of paint me a picture, like what is it like to be a migrant? What's a day in the life? What are some of the scenes that you see when you go out to the migrant communities and you're working with these families? Like just help it come to life for us.
I think I see people who work really, really hard, but it's a struggle. Like you see poverty. And I think a lot of people don't really understand poverty. And so they don't understand just how hard it is to get by. Like just how hard things that may not be a barrier for us or may not be something that would be a hurdle, they are really difficult. And the pandemic recently has just exacerbated those problems even more. But I think that my students, what people don't understand, I do work at the high school out of Mulberry High School, is that many of these students also work, and not just, working at a store 15 hours a week. Some of these students work in labor jobs, construction, farm work. I mean, if there is a job to be had, they are doing it. And I think that's been really hard since last March when many of these students took on more of a financial burden from their families just because of need, that these students were not only doing schoolwork, but then they're helping pay the bills for their families. And so just the amount of work, I laugh about it now, but in March, when schools closed, for example, and, a lot of the students were like, oh, we get to go home. We had an extra week at spring break. Not my students. My students were in the fields. And it was hot, and they're out there working. But not only that, they're also trying to balance finishing the school year. And we realized early on, it's not really... E-learning and living in a migrant camp are not very conducive. Mm-hmm. It's not just a matter of giving a device or even having the internet. When you don't have parents that speak English or know how to read, or you have multiple siblings, you have a 14-year-old watching 3 to 4 younger siblings, it's just not conducive to that home learning environment that we kind of picture in our head when we think about e-learning. And so many of my students did packets during the last end of the last school year. And I remember calling them to check in on my high school students. And one of the boys, I called him up. I'm like, are you working on your packets? You have to turn them in. And I could tell he was working. He was outdoors. He said, Miss, I'm picking with my family. And I said, well, I can't get a hold of anybody. He said, well, who do you need to get a hold of? And I told him the other students, and he yelled across the field. He's like, hey, Miss Dani wants to know if you're doing your packets.
Wow.
And I just love my students because no matter what, no matter how hard things are, and it can be really hard, they just overcome it. And that's what... I have students with the best attitude. So I can sit here and tell you, yes, it is very hard. Mm-hmm. Some of these kids deal with things that are just way beyond their age, way beyond, and just the fact that they're so resilient and so resolute and that they're just going to keep going. And they don't make excuses. So I know I'm getting off on what we're talking about, but I just want to say that I have the best students in Polk County, and I'll tell anybody that because they do overcome a lot. And I think people don't see it. You don't see the AP student who has, all these really rigorous classes that doesn't have internet access in the home, that lives in a single wide trailer, that has 2 families living in the trailer, that's writing an essay on a phone, mm-hmm. things that most teenage kids or teenage students probably wouldn't do. Mm-hmm. I mean, probably wouldn't want to do. Mm-hmm. It's just been... And I think that's the reality. I mean, just knowing that things aren't really given to them. Like most of my students really have to earn the things that mm-hmm. they have, or they have to go without them. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's something that I would want people to know. And that's not just specific to Migrant. That's specific to students living in poverty. And but I will say about migrant families also and parents, they are the most humble, loving people that you can imagine, appreciative of everything. And I've really seen that this year. My job changed a lot this year just because it had to, because we went into a global pandemic and it had to. So it required me to go out to homes. So I'm, was very visible in the community, even from March until now. And I think just the appreciation of the community. Our district has done a lot with trying to get food out to families that need it. And me being able to take that out or being able to help the families, I think it's just realizing, and how I've been successful in this role is realizing those things that are kind of barriers to those students. Like what are the challenges that they actually have? Because sometimes data doesn't show that. Like when you just look at absenteeism, or if you just look at an ELA test that they took one day, you don't see the whole picture of that child.
So, and you said that most of your students will start here in October with the tomato and strawberry crops predominantly. And then what's like the course of the year? Like where might they go next? Typically, or what's a...
So Florida is a home state for Migrant, like Florida, Texas, California. Those are like where they're at predominantly in the year because we have long crops. Most of the summer states that they go to are shorter seasons. So our families go all over the place. Michigan, Alabama, North Carolina, Indiana. We even had a couple families go to Washington State this year from Florida. But I would say the majority of my students, Georgia, North Carolina, Ohio, it's basically all over, but Michigan. And we tend to work with the same migrant programs up there as well.
So there's some sort of continuity as they move north during the different seasons. Okay. And so how long are they typically in a place at any one stretch?
We spoke to a student yesterday that their families go to 4 states in the summer. So it just really depends on the family and the season. So this student, she's actually leaving early this year in the next week or so, going to Georgia, then going to North Carolina, then going to New Jersey, and then going to Michigan, and then coming back to Florida. So she's going all over. And that can be a real challenge for those students to even matriculate into another school. Yeah. And so that's been very difficult.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I'm curious about, like, you have all of that stacked against you and just so much work. There are so many fields that need to be picked, right? Like, I mean, there is work that is not going anywhere. How do you, I would think that part of your battle and your job is getting them to buy into you need to get your education, like when it must some days seem like the least of their concerns, right? How do you do that?
I think it took a long time. Like at first, I felt like they're not going to buy into this at all. It's a culture. Who's this stranger, this person who's not even from our community? What is she talking about? But I think over the years, when you start to get those success stories that come from that community, and then that's how you build the buy-in. You have to show them, this is really possible. I am not lying to you. And I'll tell you, like, I am so proud of this, but this is a pandemic. This is a crazy year. But yesterday, I was getting ready for decision day. And I have 16 students going to college out of 20 next year and 50 college acceptances. And this is just from these 16 kids. And I'm going to tell you, like, that's hard work. That took a lot of work from those students. I made myself available to them because you can't just work the school day. In my position, you can't work the regular school day. I have to be available at night. I have to be available on some weekends. But basically I said, look, if you guys want to do this college application, I'm going to stay after school until 7 p.m. And they'll come. And they do it, and they do the work, and they'll write the essays. And so I'm really, really proud of that. And most of them are going on full scholarships next year. So it's really exciting. But I think it takes building a buy-in. And for me, we have an amazing student group at Mulberry, and it's called Adelante, which means forward. And I think building those leaders at a younger age, and by the time they're seniors, they're the role models for the 9th and 10th graders. Like, they see the actual examples of people. These 16 kids are going to college. They're going on a full scholarship. We've had students go all over. There's really not an excuse. When I talk to my students, I say, you don't have to go to college. You don't have to go to the military. You don't have to go to technical school. But I don't ever want you to say that you didn't have the opportunity or that you didn't know how to do it. Because if that kid has a desire to do something, I wanted them to know that there is a way. Because I heard a quote once, and it really just changed the way I thought. And it was, opportunity without support is a broken promise. And, there are a lot of opportunities out there, but sometimes these students just don't know how to access it. Mm-hmm. So I think my students are willing to work hard for something that's tangible, like something that they can actually achieve. So it's not just, hey, you need to go to college. It's, hey, if you want to go to college, this is how you can get there. These are the steps, and I'm going to be here the whole time. I'll mail the application for you.
Yeah.
And so that's probably how we've been the most successful. But the students, these are the hardest working students that I've seen, both in the fields and what they do for their families, but also in school. When you have them working on something, especially with college, a lot of high school students would come in and we'd tell them, you have to write an essay for this scholarship. Most of them would just turn and walk away. Mm-hmm. It's not worth it. But my students, they'll sit there and write drafts. I mean, they work on it and they really try. And so I think that's probably been the difference. But it is about meeting them at where they are.
Right. So we're going to talk to one of your students who's a success story in a minute. But I wanted to, could you just kind of give us overview, give us a couple examples of the success stories without anything identifying, but just the heights that these students have been able to reach coming from really tough circumstances.
I mean, we've had students, Brenda Alvarez is one that a lot of people know about, and she is probably one of my favorite humans, and she's probably going to see this. Mm-hmm. And she's at Stanford right now, and she came from this background. And I think what was so exciting about her story to me is just that this little girl that I remember, since she was really little, lived in the migrant camp. It struggled just like everyone else. The first week of second week of ninth grade, I remember talking to her and saying, you could be number one in the class at graduation as a ninth grader. But what she doesn't understand and what most people don't understand, everybody can do that. Mm-hmm. Every single student in the school has that potential to do that. But that girl worked so hard. And so I would definitely use Brenda as a success story. But there's migrant students that have come from our program that have gone on to Harvard, have gone on to University of Florida, different places. But to me, those are huge success stories. But to me, the success story is the kid who was a teen parent that thought that they couldn't do anything, goes on and gets a nursing license and is a nurse. Mm-hmm. Or today, I had a student today, I just talked to my principal. I called him in and said, what are your plans? And he said, I really want to go to Travis. I really want to, get a degree of training in auto. Mm-hmm. I said, let me help you. And we did it. And it took about 20 minutes. And as he was leaving, he turned around and he said, I really appreciate your help. I wouldn't have gone without you. And stuff like that. We have kids in our district that it just takes one or two people and it can change everything. So I think those are the success stories to me.
Yeah. Working with these students every day, and you've done it for many years, it must somehow change you. How are you different today, having worked with the migrant population for so many years, day in and day out?
I think it changes your values. I think for me, the things that I used to think were really important, when I started this job, I wanted everyone to, let's just show them. Everybody, we're going to get these, high degrees and we're going to do all this. But I think now, I value their work ethic. I really value what they have to contribute. And one thing that I've learned from them is about teamwork. These students work as a team with their families. They're not, they want everyone to be successful. And that's kind of what I've learned, especially this year. I used to be GPA and, just a stickler for things with the students. But now I just kind of am I just want you to be okay. Mm-hmm. I just want you to be happy. I want you to really, be happy in what you're doing in 10 years and in 5 years and right now and those things. And so I think that's changed a little, but it's changed what I feel is important because mm-hmm. I think those relationships are really important and gratitude. Mm-hmm. I've learned a lot about gratitude from them because, things that are so simple, they appreciate so much. And that's kind of addictive. You want to give to people who you feel like you're making a difference. And I don't doubt one day that I'm at work that I'm not making a difference.
Right. So. What do you think that if there's one takeaway about the migrant student population that someone listening to this gets, what would you want it to be?
Just how incredible they are. Like, I mean, these are students that have just gone through so much and have been so resilient, and that they have a lot to offer. Like, I think that sometimes people may, and, there's misconceptions about all groups, but, they may have misconceptions, but some of the brightest minds that I've ever seen in math and science have come, and technology even. I went and visited a school recently, and one of my students was there, former students, and, I'm waving at her, and I asked her what her major was, and she said computer science. And I'm like, this is a little girl that lived in a migrant family. I think there's just misconceptions that these kids can't attain some of these levels or some of these careers that you just, maybe people just don't realize. And I don't know, just how amazing they are.
Yeah. We ask everyone the same question at the end of this podcast, and that is, what is it that you, Dani Higgins, think that you contribute that's special or unique, or what are you trying to give every day to our district that's special to you?
It sounds really, I guess, I don't know. I just love, I just feel like I think it's really important. I really love what I do. I really love the families that I serve. And so to me, it doesn't really feel like a job. And I think people notice that is that, I want to build relationships with these families, and I want to leave it better than when I came.
Thank you so much for being here, Dani. I've really appreciated talking to you, and I've learned a lot. I'm excited to talk to one of your students, Luz Vasquez, who's going to Michigan State.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you so much again. Luz Vasquez, thank you so much for being here. We just heard from Dani Higgins, who heads the Migrant student program here at Polk County Public Schools. And we asked her to bring with her a student who kind of represented the students that she works with every day and what they're capable of achieving when they have supports in place. And she picked you, Luz. So thank you. Thank you so much for joining us and being willing to share your story. So, big reason why we wanted to have Dani on the show was just to help people understand more about the migrant student population and learn about what their day-to-day life is and the challenges they face and the greatness they're achieving, and even despite it. So just kind of tell us your life story briefly. You're a student at Mulberry High going to Michigan State, but tell us about what it's like to be a migrant student from your perspective.
All right, so my whole life I've been a migrant student, and I've been considered a migrant student. And basically I started actually seeing my parents come home late nights, and I didn't at school when I was as a child, elementary, I was told or asked, what do your parents do? And I was like, oh, my parents pick strawberries. And I kind of got teased, but I was I didn't see it as an issue. It didn't affect me as much. But I was just oh, what was the problem with it? But as I grew older, I began knowing why it was that. And I was considered, I guess, the poor kid, or just oh, I didn't have nice stuff. I didn't, I went to school with kind of the same clothes every year, and usually students would come back to school with new pairs of shoes, new book bags, and I'd be kind of jealous, but I was oh, mine still works, so I used it. Mm-hmm. And I started actually picking, I was taken to the field as a younger child, around 5, but I wasn't taken to pick. I was just there right beside my mom while she'd pick aside, and since she didn't have anyone to take care of me, I just watched her pick the whole day. And so she said I really did cry a lot. I'd be on top of a cooler while my older brother, which was around 7, he picked with my dad with a mini bucket of blueberries, and this was in Michigan, and during the summer, I believe. Mm-hmm. And just growing up, I was seeing what my parents did, and it was common for me just to go every year for the summer to travel to Michigan. This is Michigan would always be our one place to go for the summer to pick blueberries, and then apples, and then sometimes cherry and peaches.
What does that work like for someone tell me, at some point, you started out with just going to the field and accompanying your mom, but how old were you when you started actually picking? And just help me understand what that day is like day after day.
Actually, it all started right on my birthday. My mom had taken me to apply at Michigan at this blueberry company. And at first I was kind of excited, kind of get my own check. But then I saw it that afternoon, I got my like ID and stuff like. And that's when I was like, okay. My mom was like, okay, now you're going to start working with us.
And how old were you?
14.
14, okay.
And at age 14, the next day, I automatically woke up in the morning. My mom had me like cook tortillas, and then basically our lunch and stuff, while my parents were still like kind of packing up our supplies, our buckets, our carts. And we'd get everything while my mom cooked, and I was kind of just like kind of packing up, foiling up food. And right when we get to work, it was like automatically, we just kind of, I picked with my mom. We were all in like one branch, like one tree, blueberry tree. One side of my mom and the other side's me, and we just kind of go around it. And that was basically the whole day, from early mornings to late nights. And I went home to my little brother and sister, who were just taking care of each other. And sometimes they would like just kind of ask us, like, since they didn't know how to cook, we'd come home to, we'd eat around 10, since we had to cook for our whole family. And living at a trailer camp, we had to live with another family to pay rent. Mm-hmm. And just coming home. But usually just growing up, that was just during the summers. But when I came back here in Florida, I came here and I started picking strawberries, which is now it was 4 of us, including me. Since I was already old enough, I got my ID again, and I started picking my mom on the weekends. And sometimes on the afternoons, since we lived at a trailer camp where the fields were right outside our doorstep, I'd come home, I'd call my mom, tell her, I'm here already, just to not make her worry. And sometimes I'd offer her and be like, would you like to, would you like me to take you, like, a jug of water, or make any water that you need, or any chores that you need me to do? And yeah, sometimes she said, yeah, it's really hot, can you bring me a soda, or can you bring me, like, agua de melon, which is water, melon water. So I'd go out, and then there was, like, it was just, like, our trailer camp was, like, kind of, like, all like surrounded with acres of strawberries. Mm-hmm. And so I'd go walking into the fields looking for like the trucks. Just seeing the trucks, I know where my mom would go. So I'd go into the fields and like ask like, is my mom here? If not, I'd kind of stand in the corner and offer my mom some water, and I'd look for my dad then and offer him water while he worked. And then she would send me back home, just saying, just kind of brew and watch your brother and sister. And they'd come around 7 or 8 afternoons. And then just, that'd be my usual, like, how it usually went. And this is, like, still in middle school. But then just moving here in Polk County, I started working more consistently with my brother, and strawberry was the main thing I kind of did. But I know my brother had picked with my parents, like during the pickle season, pickles, cucumbers, and squash. Mm-hmm. And just last year, I actually picked squash with my parents. Oh, okay. I don't know. Sorry, I already kind of skipped like a. Sorry.
It's okay. How did you? There are students who find graduation and going to college a daunting proposition with circumstances that don't come near the ones that you have faced. You're working long days, you're physically exhausted, you're sharing housing with another family, at least at some point in your life. And you had many reasons you could have said, why put anything more on me? Why bother? Why work harder? Why have you committed yourself? Like, what was it that made you say, I'm going to get my diploma and I'm going to go to college one day? And like, how did you hang on to that?
Actually, just kind of going out to the weekends. I didn't really like the job. I didn't like coming in the weekend, going to work early mornings, and then just kind of realizing that, my weekends I spend kind of just picking in like dirt, mud, and it was kind of gross. It was gross. It grossed me at one point, but then I realized I kind of just browse and think. And I look at my brother sometimes, and we kind of talk that like, we don't really want this. Like if you realize that there's many other people our age probably like having like late, like going to the park or going, just enjoying their day, mm-hmm. not in the fields. And we get kind of like, kind of down. We put ourselves down, but then we kind of told ourselves like, but we're doing this all for our mom and dad because they did this all for us. So one day we'll pay them back for what they have done. And so just going out to the fields and just kind of looking at each other very tirelessly, I'd kind of just be like, this is really not what we don't want to, like, we don't want to do this when we grow up. So our goal for, like, each other was to not do this. And we don't want to do this like my parents did. So our goal was just to.
Education is how you won't do this anymore. Yes. You'll break that. So your parents are migrant workers. Was this sort of a family, something that was passed down, or does it not work that way? Like, I have no idea.
Actually, my grandparents, they're in Mexico, so they never came to America, and they've never picked or anything. They kind of had their own farm animals, cows.
Oh, okay. All right.
But my own parents kind of met up as when they were younger, around their 19 or 20s. Mm-hmm. And they both found each other. And my dad brought my mom here to America. And that's when they started working because they didn't really know anything. They kind of started working as like in hay, packing hay. Mm-hmm. But then they worked here down here more in Dover area, and that's when they started working on strawberries. But it's kind of, they started it, and so I know I don't want my family to start it one day, so that's not just like.
So did your parents impress upon you, like, we're here, we came to America, we're working this hard because we want you? I mean, is that what the narrative has been?
Yeah, they tell us. I know my mom tells me that you see us doing this work. She tells my little brother, she reminds us every day that, I'm working hard here, taking plastic off. And I see her done it because I know I don't like doing it. And it's hard. And so she comes home telling us, like, I hope you're doing good in school. She checks my little brother out. And she looks at me, and I tell her I'm doing good. And she does give me time to do my homework and stuff like that. But she reminds us every day that she's doing this for us.
So in y'all, and you and your brother getting an education, and you're doing that for each other, but also for your parents. I mean, this is what they dreamed of when they came here and why they've worked so hard so that you guys could have this opportunity, right? So this is a tribute to, so the fact that you're going to Michigan State and you're going to get a degree in political science, you think?
Yes.
That's a tribute to your parents and the fact that they long ago set this in action, this course for you, right?
Yeah.
Well, so tell us about your plans. You're going to go to, what's the ultimate goal? What do you want to achieve after you go to Michigan State?
My ultimate goal is actually to, I'll be majoring in political science, and I want to go into policy to create, because I know most of the time, like, there's not really a change in like upper level, I guess. Mm-hmm. So I know that if I work in policy and work my way up to become like a legislative one day, maybe, I know there will be change because I know coming from a background of migrant, I know what it's hard, and like we need assistance, since I know like I have other family that have like no other older brother, and usually it's always the older brother or older sibling who kind of goes, and their younger sibling kind of follow up too. And like my older brother, luckily he kind of inspired me to graduate and go to Michigan State with him.
Okay.
And
when you are in a position one day to help shape policy related to migrant workers, what will you change?
I want to change I want to create awareness to the community, migrant community actually, and just like seeing out like right where my community right now, there's many like homes that are not worth living in, and expensive too, and I see like the destruction it has, and honestly it's not right. I don't see it as a right thing, and I know that back then maybe rent for my family was kind of cheaper, but moving here to Polk County and seeing the different communities where I live in, and the different families actually have family living in there, it's not right. Like honestly, I don't like it, And it kind of makes me sad because I have younger cousins that live there, and they kind of, luckily, like when I was younger, my older brother and I and my parents, we worked hard to gather money and buy our own home. So now just seeing my cousins, when we invite them over, they kind of want to stay with us because they know they don't really want to go back to their home. It's not a home to them.
Gotcha. I'm curious about high school, middle school, all levels of school. They're very hard socially for many of us. I was a complete, nerd in school. But I mean, and I had just sort of your mundane issues. And you alluded to this earlier when you, you didn't have the nicest things. And you were worried about how that would how that would affect your day-to-day life in school. I wondered, do you feel that you've been able to educate your classmates? Do you think they have a better idea of what it's like to be a migrant student because of you? Or have they learned anything from you? Or have you tried to teach them anything?
Well, many have actually are inspired by me, kind of, and they kind of look up to me, which I kind of like it because I'm like, oh, I guess I'm a leader to them, which I don't really consider myself to be a leader. Like, I was kind of like the shy one, and I still am, honestly. But just going out, actually, I didn't start volunteering until my ninth grade or coming up ninth grade year, and it was barely my second year here at Polk County. And I didn't know Ms. Dani Higgins, but my brother had introduced me to her because he was going to be an upcoming senior at that time. And my first time was actually during when Hurricane Irma hit. My brother was like, oh, do you want to start volunteering? And I had no clue what it was about, what was the point. But until my brother said, oh, it's going to benefit you. So I'm like, okay, I'll do it. And so just seeing out, I didn't know my area yet. So just going out to the camps right beside where I live, I know we packed packs of water and Gatorade, and I know the power went out at my home, so Ms. Dani Higgins had stopped by and gave us a cooler of ice and milk and water just for that week, I think, when there was no electricity. But during that time, that's when I met Ms. Dani Higgins, and I met many of the seniors. I met Brenda. I met many of my brother's friends, actually. And they all they're like, oh, she's going to be an upcoming freshman. I was like, yeah. I was like, okay. And I was the only freshman at that time. And just going out to the camps, I had started doing my hours there. But then going to, once school began, I started going out to the group meetings, and I was like, okay. And then I met the president of Adelante Club, and that's when I started volunteering with Ms. Dani Higgins, after school, going out to camps, packing stuff at the middle school, and just doing packages of food. And since I didn't know how to drive, we just kind of packed while the older kids would go out to the trailer camps and deliver door to door. And then once I started 10th grade year, I did involve myself in, I did try out soccer, chess, and then I still had time to do volunteering service with Ms. Dani. And by that time, I did gain, 200 hours with Ms. Dani and volunteering at the Boys and Girls Club. And then after that, we also did the holidays. During the holidays, Ms. Dani, those are actually my favorite part of the time. Ms. Dani Higgins had invited us to we would pack some presents for the kids at the trailer camps, and all of our team members would just kind of get a roll of wrapping paper. We wrapped presents, and then by Christmas Eve we would kind of go out to churches and pack our own vehicles with gifts and stuff, and then go out to the community and pass out their gifts to the parents and for the next day so that the children can actually.
So you've done a lot of work to support your fellow migrant students, and I'm sure in doing that you've helped them believe in themselves and their ability to achieve, and then you've set an example even for the non-migrant students that you can make a difference in people's lives and really impact them and help them chart a better course for themselves. That's really inspiring. So thank you for sharing that. I guess just real quickly, Dani told us a little bit about what the Migrant program does, but if you had to identify a support that, if you had to pick one thing or service it provided that you could focus on, just tell us what, to help us understand the impact of that program. Just focus on one aspect, something that it did for you that made a difference.
Can you repeat that again?
Just in all the services that you've received from Dani and the Migrant program, could you focus on one and explain the impact it had on your life?
Oh, okay. Well, just kind of volunteering with Adelante Club, the contribution of having time to pack, after school, many had asked me oh, what do you do after school? But packing food to the children at the camps was actually one big thing that really impacted myself, because I know at one point I know I didn't have food, but I know my cousins that live there, and they just kind of packing food constantly, every day after school. Even though many people didn't show up, I still had time, and I kind of enjoyed it because I know we're making a difference, and we're providing stuff that many don't ask for, because some parents don't know how to ask. They're afraid to ask, and many struggle. And seeing my own family and my uncles and aunts, they tell me hey, they do thank me at one point. They thank Ms. Dani, and just kind of I just kind of enjoy
so the chance to be empowered and to help others is really,
yeah.
And that, would you say that's kind of shaped you now want to go into policy and change the law to help people? I mean, do your experiences in high school and helping these people on a one-on-one basis, has that inspired maybe the plan you have for your life?
Yes, this is something. And Ms. Dani Higgins, I'm really thankful for her, meeting her, because I've never had anyone like that, and and because of her, I really do believe that this, I'm really having the opportunity to go to college next year. Well, this coming out fall. So
gotcha.
I'm just really grateful for Ms. Dani.
Congratulations, Luce.
Thank you.
You're an inspiration and a shining example of what is possible with a Polk County Public Schools education. So thank you for coming and talking to us. I've learned a lot about you and your life and the lives of other migrant students. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you change careers to become a teacher, para, or bus driver? Do you remember the moment when you knew a career in education was right for you? Are you a PCPS alumnus who remembers the teacher who made you believe you were capable of great things? Are you a student who is already putting your K-12 education to work in our community? We all have a story to tell, and those stories are part of what makes PCPS great. Tell us yours. To be a guest or to nominate someone you know to be featured on The People of PCPS, fill out the form posted online at polkschoolsfl.com/podcast. Thanks for listening.
You can subscribe to the People of PCPS podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify, or watch online at the Polk County Public Schools YouTube channel. To learn more about the People of PCPS and other Polk County Public Schools podcasts, visit polkschoolsfl.com/podcasts.